Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be exploring a story from the Bible today, 1 Samuel 28. And I think it has some pretty amazing timeless lessons that we can all relate to. It's all about those moments when we feel stuck and, maybe desperate for some kind of answer. And it's so tempting to take shortcuts, even if those shortcuts feel a little bit, off.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. It's like when we're under pressure, our decision making can get a little wonky.
Totally.
Uh,
So let's paint a picture here. We're talking ancient Israel. The Philistines are at the doorstep. King Saul is their leader, and he is freaking out. He's totally lost his connection with God, and he feels completely lost.
Classic case of a leader crumbling under pressure,
Yeah.
right? His decision making skills have gone right out the window.
And get this, Saul had outlawed mediums and witchcraft earlier on, but now he's facing this huge crisis,
Yeah.
and he's so desperate for guidance that he actually decides to seek out a witch.
It's like a textbook example of what fear and desperation can do to a person. You can compromise your values, even the ones you stood up for publicly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Saul disguises himself and goes to see this witch, the witch of Endor, under the cover of darkness. Imagine being that witch. You're suddenly face to face with the king who outlawed your entire profession. That's got to be terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. I can only imagine the sheer terror she must have felt. But here's the thing. Despite the danger, she agrees to summon the spirit of the prophet Samuel for Saul.
And that's where things take a turn for the worse. Samuel's message to Saul is basically like a punch to the gut. He says, "Because of your disobedience to God, you are doomed. Defeat and death are coming for you and your sons."
Yeah, it's a harsh reminder that looking for guidance from sources that go against what you believe in usually doesn't end well. In Saul's case, it was like he sealed his own fate.
So he basically gets the opposite of what he was looking for. Makes you think about those modern day Witch of Endor situations we all find ourselves in, right?
Correct.
Sometimes we're tempted to take the easy road, even if it means sacrificing our integrity.
For sure. We might not be consulting witches in the 21st century, but that core dilemma is still the same. How do we stay true to ourselves when the pressure is on? How do we resist those shortcuts that seem like a quick fix but could have some pretty nasty long-term consequences?
That is the million-dollar question. And it's something we all struggle with. So how do we actually avoid those choices that we'll end up regretting later, especially when we feel like we're backed into a corner?
Well, that's what we're here to unpack today. And I think there's some serious wisdom we can pull from Saul's story and apply to our own lives. But maybe first we should take a step back and see how Saul even got himself into this mess in the first place.
Okay, I'm all ears. Understanding his mistakes might just help us avoid making the same ones.
Right. I think one of Saul's biggest problems was that he couldn't handle the pressure. He just let fear and anxiety control him, and that messed up his judgment. And ultimately, that's what led him down this path of destruction.
It's like he completely lost sight of his values, like who he was and what he believed in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something we all have to be careful of, right?
Right.
When we get overwhelmed, it's easy to let our emotions take over. And that's when we make choices we regret.
So how do we stop that from happening? How do we stay grounded when things get tough and still make wise decisions?
That's where building that ethical muscle comes in. Remember we talked about that earlier? It's about creating habits and practices that keep us connected to our values, no matter what challenges we face.
Right. So it's like training for an ethical marathon. What kind of training exercises can we do for that?
One of the best things you can do is figure out what your core values are. What are those principles that you're not willing to compromise on? The things that guide your decisions.
So basically getting clear on what truly matters to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once you know what those values are, it's a good idea to write them down. Really think about what they mean to you and how they shape your life.
That makes sense. It's like having a personal mission statement. You can always go back to it when you're facing a tough choice.
Right. It's like having an internal compass to guide you through difficult times.
So we've figured out our values. What's the next step in our ethical training?
Well, it's not enough to just know your values in your head. You have to actually live them out. Integrate them into your daily life.
So walk the talk.
Exactly. You have to make choices, big and small, that match up with your values, even when it's not easy or convenient.
It's funny. I was reading something the other day about how making your bed every morning can actually help you make better decisions throughout the day.
That's interesting. How does that work?
Well, the idea is that when you start your day with a small act of discipline, it kind of sets a positive tone for everything else you do.
Oh, I see. So it's like those small choices build momentum that carries over into other areas?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the same principle applies to ethical decision making. The more you practice making choices that align with your values, the easier it becomes to make those choices when the pressure is really on.
Like building up muscle memory, but for ethical decisions. So when you face one of those witch of Endor moments, you're more likely to react in a way that's true to yourself.
Exactly. So we've hit the pause button, taken a deep breath. What's next in dealing with these ethical dilemmas?
This is where having a decision-making framework can be really helpful. Basically, a set of questions you can ask yourself to evaluate your options and make a choice that aligns with your values.
So like a checklist for ethical dilemmas.
Yeah.
I like that. What kind of questions are we talking about?
Sure. Some good ones to consider are, is this decision in line with my core values? What could happen if I make this choice both now and down the road? Who will be affected by my decision? Is there a way to reach my goal without sacrificing my integrity?
Those are some really thought-provoking questions. Just asking those questions can change your whole perspective and help you see things more clearly.
Absolutely. Because it forces you to move past that initial emotional reaction and really think things through in a rational and ethical way.
It's like creating a mental space to weigh your options and make a choice you can stand behind.
Exactly. And speaking of standing behind our choices, we need to remember that we're all human. We're going to make mistakes, even with the best intentions, and a solid ethical framework.
That's true. None of us are perfect. We're all going to make choices we wish we could take back.
Absolutely. That's where grace comes in. Grace for ourselves and for others.
I like that because it's easy to beat ourselves up when we mess up, but that doesn't really help us move forward.
No, it doesn't. In fact, that self-criticism can make things worse. When we feel bad about ourselves, we're more likely to act impulsively and make the same mistakes again.
So cultivating self-compassion is important. Like you said before, we need to remember we're human, we're going to stumble sometimes, and we need to be as kind and understanding to ourselves as we would be to a friend.
Well said. It's about recognizing that making a mistake doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you're human. And just like we need to give ourselves grace, we need to extend it to others.
Because everyone's fighting a battle we know nothing about, right?
Exactly. When we judge others harshly, when we expect them to be perfect, it creates this culture of fear and shame.
And as we saw with Saul, that doesn't exactly lead to good decisions.
Not at all. When we approach others with empathy and understanding, when we remember that we all make mistakes, it creates space for growth and healing.
So it's about creating a culture of grace for everyone. And that's a powerful way to combat the fear and desperation that can lead us down those witch of Endor paths.
I totally agree. A culture of grace is essential for ethical growth and resilience. It all starts with recognizing our shared humanity, our shared capacity for both good and bad.
That's a great reminder. We all mess up sometimes, but it's how we respond to those mess-ups that really matters.
Beautifully said. It's about learning from our experiences, showing grace to ourselves and others, and continuing to try to make choices that match up with their values.
You know, one thing that really stands out to me about Saul's story is that he actually had people he could turn to for advice. I mean, Samuel had been his mentor for years.
That's a really good point. It makes you think about who are the Samuels in our own lives. You know, those people we can go to for honest guidance, especially when we're feeling lost.
Yeah, it's like having a friend who's not afraid to tell you when you're messing up and remind you of what really matters.
Exactly. And sometimes those people might come from unexpected places. It could be a coworker, a family member, even someone you just met who offers a fresh perspective.
So we need to be open to getting advice from different sources.
Exactly. And we have to build relationships where we feel safe enough to be honest about our struggles and to ask for help when we need it.
Because let's be real, we can't do this alone.
No way. We all need people to support us, challenge us, and help us stay true to ourselves.
I love that. It's like we're all in this together, and we need each other to get through the tough times.
I agree. And that's a powerful message from Saul's story, even though he made some terrible choices. His story reminds us that we don't have to figure everything out on our own. We can ask for help, build strong relationships, and create a culture of grace where everyone can thrive.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. Thanks for being here with us as we explored this ancient story and figure out how it still applies to our lives today.
It's been my pleasure, and I hope you'll keep thinking about these ideas as you face your own Witch of Endor moments.
And remember, when you're facing a tough decision, take a deep breath, think about your values, and don't be afraid to ask for advice from someone you trust.
Great advice. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you on our next deep dive where we'll explore another fascinating topic and uncover even more wisdom.